Kate, I'm digging the background.
Yeah, I got sick of seeing my house in the background.
Oh, my son really likes the background too.
Love it.
Maybe I'll start doing something more professional.
No, what is unprofessional about that? Nothing.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. All right. I just start the meetings. I don't do anything. Matt, Maeve.
Sorry, I'm thinking deeply about, so the Boston Municipal Court Jurisdiction Statute is written based on word maps from 1886.
Yes.
And I have a friend who works in GIS who was able to make a PNG and digitize all this for us. But there are all these questions about pieces of land that just simply did not exist in 1886 in
This is true.
South Bay, areas along the Charles River that, as far as I can tell, are just not addressed by the statute. So if anybody has any bright ideas about that. But that's very much in the weeds. I think in general, I think we're chugging along like great, David. I mean, I think that it's sort of pretty much the same as yesterday. Like the court seems to be reacting well. We're doing well in terms of getting stuff through the pipeline. The wizard is constantly changing for the better, and so we are having to do some manual fixes at the coding stage that we weren't necessarily anticipating. But that is that's not terrible nor unexpected. And for folks who are SMEs on this call, which is like basically everybody, one of the most helpful things that can be done right now would be to like just start thinking about flow of the interviews, right? And thinking about once we have that flow down, like what screens are going to be presented, thinking about what text that goes on screens.
Cool. Does anyone have any blockers?
I've just finished the onboarding documentation, so I just wanted to share that with everybody and maybe get some feedback on what needs to be included. I started out doing it with like a whole overview of the project and everything like that, but I think that once people get their hands on that document, they already know all of that. So I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible. So I'm going to drop that in the Slack. Just drop the link now.
Right. I'm still listening in my earbuds. I'm going to go get my tea.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, I don't think we have any blockers at this point. I know that, Noelle, you ran through the wizard. I didn't actually see the comment that you put up there.
I am still doing the wizard for that petition.
Okay, that's the comment.
It's taking a really long time.
It was hard, right? That form is very difficult.
Yeah, well, so I did all those export fields that we talked about, the yes and the dragging it and making sure that it had the multiple lines. And then I'm still working through the wizard. I think one of the questions that I had is if you see that they're missing, like I'm trying.
Which form, just out of curiosity?
The petition for appointment of a guardian of a minor. There were like a lot of fields. I think we worked on this like 3 days ago or something, just doing the field labeling. I think that was this one. I don't know. But anyway, one of my questions was if it's missing, if the wizard is missing one of the entries that we've labeled, meaning like I know that it's missing like the court name. I was just wondering, I know if there's duplicates, I usually will write in duplicate, but if we're missing something, I didn't know how to, do I just write that on the card in Trello?
So I think those are the standard ones, right? Those are the ones that are automatically pulled through.
So if it's not on the wizard and it was on the PDF,
yeah,
then it's because the automation is taking care of it.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Exactly. And there might be a mismatch. You know, someone might put a name that is a reserved name that they didn't mean to, so the automator's taking care of it. But we can work that out in post as it is.
Okay, great.
As it were.
Yeah. So
I hadn't seen that you joined the call in the middle of that question, and then I went to the faces. I was like, oh, thank God.
So I want to. Yeah. So one thing relevant maybe to that particular form. is I had some students who were working on guardianship stuff already in a platform called Community Lawyer, which actually runs on DocAssemble. And we may be able to repurpose. I know, Noel, I know I put you in touch with the student who was working on that, Mallory.
Yes.
I'm actually going to try to talk to the Community Lawyer folks and see if actually they can do a technical fix on the back end, which would allow someone to submit that form to the court as opposed to us having to build a whole new form for that. So yeah, so I just shot a link in the chat here, and I'll put something in Slack. And basically there are 3 forms on there that it might make more sense to do any edits in the Community Lawyer version as opposed to having to create a new thing, because they're pretty much done. But it depends upon what Community Lawyer says about their ability to help us just port them into the system. So I just wanted to flag that. So you should look at those. I guess the point is you should look at those 3 interviews and see if there are any forms that you're struggling with now. And if they are, maybe just hold off and work on some other forms. And then we'll figure out whether or not we can access them.
Okay.
I'm gonna
That's all,
actually
sorry.
add a question. That was not mine. I did not mean to unmute on a bang. It might be worth, I'm gonna add a note in our backlog, which we'll see what we get to in our backlog, but after the MVP, thinking about how we might be able to utilize forms that have been made in other systems. Because there are ways in which our system hooks into things that have been created by our system. And I just have to check with Quentin, like how it would handle code that came in externally, right? Like what kind of, like if there's a way to integrate those, which there might be. So if I forget to add that, Maeve, like just, I don't know what you do, but like,
That's the
punishment,
list.
I'll remind you.
like,
So actually, Quentin and I were having a conversation about this morning. But we're not as sort of far ahead as you are. So one of the things that we would like to do is for the forms that we have all these great labels and everything done, and they're nice digital fillable forms now, we would like to make those available on the site just as a in progress. So basically we'll say these forms in progress, here you can just download the form. And then just like, just, you know, nothing else, but it does a couple things. One, it gives access to something that someone, if it was a form that could be e-filed, they could then use that and e-file it. Although that's only a subset of forms and it's hard for people to do. But it would at least give people access to the form. But also, I think more importantly, it shows the user transparently that we have all these other things we're working on and that are in progress. And it makes it more clear that it's not just the one form that's up there that we have, right? So, and then that discussion turned into one, Michelle, you were talking about, which is, can we then also maybe include linking out the other forms that people have put together? And there aren't really, we're having a hard time identifying some Massachusetts ones that were actual guided interviews that would be more than just like linking them to the forms. Or, I mean, there are a couple of maybe hot docs A to J stuff, but not really that much in Massachusetts. So we were thinking maybe Community Lawyer, which is why we were thinking about this, because we have a couple forms that my students have done. But yeah, so that's exactly, we are all on the same, pulling the same direction.
great,
David,
awesome.
The thing is about I think it's a great idea to put those fillable PDFs up so people can fill them out. There's a setting in Adobe that allows people to save it once they've filled it in. And it's just one click, but if so many times people don't, they fill it in on their computers, right, and then they save it and all their answers are gone. Okay. So that is something to remember if we're going to offer that, to make sure that people can actually can make it can save it.
Yes.
And then
Can we add that to the tutorial, Maeve?
How are we going to save that? Let's add it to the.
Yeah. And then there's another piece on top of that where Adobe has a rule that if you do this, you can only do 500 of them or something, but it may just be it may be that you can only do 500 if you're submitting them. So if you're submitting them electronically to some database that imports the answers. So I think if you make them fillable and savable and you email them and they're going as a flat PDF to whoever.
When you say they have a rule, what do you mean by they have a rule?
There's, you know, this is
it part of a terms of service agreement? Is it
I think it's part of the when you get the Adobe license. Now I'm talking like 5 or 6 years ago, so I haven't looked at it. We don't use Adobe anymore, but I know that at a certain point we didn't. You know, the court didn't want to make them savable because of this licensing. So I don't know what it is, but I know it's in the print. That's not too hard to find it was not too hard to find at the time, but because I mean, I don't care. I'm Mass Legal Help. I'm not worried. I don't think that many people are doing it, but I think you are getting enough attention for this project. It's one of these P's and Q's.
Yeah, if it's something that if you can find any of that language, could you shoot that to me?
Yeah, it's just something, and I mean, and the other thing
because it might, depending on where it is, it might not control. I have
right.
I have not.
No. I just wanted to raise it because it might be something that's going to come back to bite you. And then the other part of this is if you make it fillable and savable, it does mean that you could, if it turns out this way, if you're saving a fillable, savable PDF and then you email it to the court, I mean, there's no reason that the court would, but the court could alter it, right? Because it's still editable. So it's something to bear in mind.
Well, I don't think that will affect the. We'll look into it, but I think our output's going to be our output.
Yeah. No, so I didn't think so either. I just wanted to these are the couple of things that you need to think. Yeah. Not you, but a person needs to think about.
That's okay. I need to think about them.
Okay.
All right. So we'll add them. Make sure they're savable to the workflow. And then, Matt and Maeve, could you, how many forms do we have now that have the labeling done?
Off the top of my head, I am not sure. Let me just have a look at the Trello board.
I was meaning to check the Trello board all morning to answer this question, but since you're on the call.
I want to say one more thing. If we're going to do if we are going to offer fillable, savable forms, I think as part of the, I don't remember what you call it, but the onboarding, if we're going to add this, make them savable, I think we go back to making sure that the hover, you know, the fields have names, but then there's also underneath is the hover thing. So I'm not saying go back and do, I'm saying don't go back and do them, but as people are doing them, it might make sense. I mean, they go in automatically. All you have to do is take the underscores out.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do any special, I mean, if it's an easy thing to do, we could do something for readability, but we are not trying to provide the forms as an alternative for people to use them
I know. I get it. I just thought, don't erase them. That's all I mean.
Yeah,
don't erase them.
It's more a transparency, a matter of transparency than anything else, that people know these are the forms we're working on. Right. And we don't want to make any representations about what they can or can't do with those forms. We just want to say, here's what's in the hopper. Here's where we are. Mm-hmm. Oh no, Abigail, you got to stay down there. I'm trying to keep them off the camera.
I think we have 25 forms labeled around about.
Okay,
that's
great.
Quick count.
So, and I don't even think we have to. Let's see if those have the ability to save, and then if it's a quick thing to just alter those, and then if you can, and then we'll be in touch, and then you tell me when those are ready. And I'll start to put those up. The one thing that we'll need in addition to just that, and I know this is somewhere else in the workflow, but maybe it needs to be moved up, is there needs to be a plain language description of what that form is.
Yeah, so, it is in the workflow, but I think you're right. It can be moved up when people are labeling. I think that's maybe a natural place to put it.
So this was, I think, something Matt and I and maybe Quentin were talking about a bit, is that we might shift a bit away from the labeling in the wizard to starting to create the language that's going to be going with the interviews, starting to create the language that's going to be going with the questions, and as well as the flow of the interview, but also just the language from what, well, I don't know, I haven't worked with legal people that extensively on this kind of thing, but I've found, I don't have like extensive experience, but I found language often takes a long time to nail down. And so I think we should start on that process. We have some forms labeled, we have some, you know, we're going to be able to generate some code and stuff, but to get the actual content may take longer. I'd like to at least test out how much work it takes, right? And time it out and see what portion, like how much we're going to, you know, labor force we're going to need to put towards that.
Yeah, I also
go ahead.
I was going to say I suspect it's going to differ wildly from form to form.
I agree. I would also say, just to add a little extra context to what Michelle is saying, that we do need to spend time talking about language, but it's hard to talk about language until we've decided on the flow from screen to screen, which thankfully is something that the SMEs can also help with. And Kate Berry and Jen Howard have been really, really helpful on this. So I think it is super helpful to decide what order it's super helpful to get input from the SMEs about what order the questions should be presented in, and when answers to certain questions trigger showing or hiding other questions. And then after that, figuring out what the precise language is on each screen. Do you think that's fair, Michelle and David?
Good point. Yeah, that's a great articulation for it. I mean, also, I don't know your process, right? Like, I don't know what I trust you. And I think, you know, I think it'd be worth hearing from people with lived experience on what, like, you know, that would mean to them. But that makes sense to me off the bat, you know.
You might, when you're thinking about forms, this kind of language in the screens, I think Quentin was proposing sort of a, you know, beginning and ending screen. So we sort of have welcome to, you know, the mass access line, assembly line, whatever you want to do. But then, you know, an effective way to reach people is to use direct address and active voice. But the question is, does the person who's asking the questions, who's asking the questions? Is it a we? You know, we're helping you fill out this form. We're doing this together. I'm helping you fill out this form. I need to know the court. You know, who's going to be the agent who's interacting with the people asking the questions? I'm not expecting an answer this minute. I just think it's something to think about, and that is the kind of thing, you know, in terms of branding and presenting these forms that should be uniform and consistent, and can be from one form to the next.
There's something to add to the handbook style guide.
Is there a style guide?
No, but we're going to add one.
All right.
Well, we have to build it before you add it.
Well, we add a blank slate, and then I think we fill it in.
We learn as we
build
go.
up from as we go along, which is kind of like how we're doing everything, just building it as we're experiencing things and as things are coming up.
I think not every just to be clear, not every interview needs to introduce the tool. The tool is going to have its own introduction, and then each like interview is going to say, you know, this particular interview is about this issue. So the interviews themselves just worry about themselves. They don't worry about the introduction to the rest of the project. Cool. Gosh, who could use a nap? Yeah.
I was going to say, so just about wrangling volunteers, I've got access, Matt and I both have access from Dave now to the people who've completed that form, and then also just, you know, trying to organize so we start getting those forms labeled. And once we've once I've gotten some feedback on this guide, or the first draft, then I'm going to start just distributing it to volunteers and then asking them, if they need any help onboarding, or I see that we've got like quite a few new people. I'm just a bit nervous about reaching out to people, because what happens if they're actually experts? I just don't know,
It's fine.
How do I?
No,
You're the expert
great?
in this.
Don't we want experts?
And yeah.
Yeah, we do. But I don't want to be like, here's this guide, and then they're like, yeah, I know this.
Well, that's language. You can just say,
it's framing.
This is our onboarding for people who are less familiar with whatever.
Right.
Well, and also this is onboarding. The onboarding is for this project. So things like how you move your cards through the trail. I mean, you guys have built this whole protocol about how you do these things. It's not, and it goes into the details of this is where you go to, but just because we have a wizard, anybody who has Python experience or Trello experience isn't going to know what the wizard does, so.
It's true, it's specific to this project.
It's very, so I wouldn't worry about that at all.
That's
and
true.
then you can say, read TFM.
Yeah. Which is, I think, how actually I think most people will probably interact with it. So that's why you want to have those sections with links. So my expectation is probably that you're in conversation with someone, and it's like you give them this, and then they'll go and do something, but then someone's going to hit you with a question, and then you'll just be able to take section like, oh, here's the documentation, or we don't have documentation for that. Okay, here's the answer. Oh, now let's add that to the documentation.
Yeah. I love documentation. I hate reading it or writing it.
Right. What you need is someone who plays that like intermediate level of like pointing you to the right spot in the documentation.
Yep.
Right. So they have a question, and like, yeah, they could read through the entire documentation, but that's unreasonable to expect. So then you can help say, oh, that section there.
Okay, so let's build it. Let's just do a little Q&A to guide you through the documentation.
I could build a natural language model that we could actually, the thing I was doing, the project I was working on before this was an entire question answer pairing thing. It seemed so important when I was doing it a month ago. I'm like, this is going to be, and now I'm like, what was it?
Okay, so that's just where we were at Matt and I in terms of volunteering and getting people kind of like on board, and also just liaising with people. So far, it's been pretty good. I mean, people are reaching out on Slack, and everyone's been very, very helpful.
Right, and give it that personal touch. Not, I know this is not what you're saying. It's like, oh, a new person, here's the link, read the documentation. It's like, oh, hey, what are you interested in doing? Blah blah. Blah. Okay.
Yeah, and Maeve has definitely been doing that. But I know you know that, David. But the other thing too is like there are a lot of little like legal research tasks coming up too. So maybe I'll put together like a Trello card for that.
A Trello column perhaps, where we can have each card be a research task. Could that work?
Sure. Yeah. Michelle, maybe this is the time to reclaim the back end Trello board.
That one column that's like, this has nothing to do with code.
Yeah.
This is all questions for lawyers. Okay. Well.
I'm in two minds about that though, Maeve. Maybe you and I can discuss this. On the one hand, there's a lot of tasks on the back end Trello that have actually nothing to do with software development, and so we could use help on. On the other hand, I wonder how many people will be turned off by another Trello board.
Well, but we could theoretically put it on the same Trello board, just in a different Trello column on a different flow. So it would be like, we have a column that's like, everybody who's not interested in this, go back. And then in front of that we'll make a new flow chart for things moving through research.
I think the question is, if the card's going to be able to move between those columns, then it should be in that same Trello board. But if it's something that's only going to exist to an audience that never needs to see those other things,
which I think
well, the question is, it's not just the audience who's going to consume the information that is discovered. It is also the who can provide the information.
Yeah.
So also that audience needs to be able to see it, right? Our research team, which I think right now is, and if some of that stuff is.
Yeah, if it's going to be a card that's going to move through everything on that board, then it should be on that board. But if it's a card that's sort of in a little island.
Well,
like,
so I don't want.
Well,
so,
I don't think we need to.
You figure it out.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
We will figure it out.
I trust you. I trust you.
Yeah.
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 It's 5 to 7. It's 5 to the hour. Is there anything
right.
else that urgent needs to talk about, or can we just go back to Slack?
Go back to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Sleep, Slack.
Well, I actually have something very important to bring up. Maeve, is it South Africa or Ireland where they call people majors and minors?
South Africa. Why?
Okay, because that is totally not a thing in the United States, but it's
What?
Yeah.
I thought that wasn't a thing. You're all like majors, and I'm like, really? I thought it was just minors.
Yeah. No,
it wasn't crazy.
Kate
Ha!
and I were talking about it, and we're like, we wish we did that here. Because there are labels where it's like plaintiff is major, and I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, it immediately scans what it means, but it is totally not a thing. But it's great.
I was labeling
I'm
with
just
somebody,
pitching this all.
and it was, and they were like, yeah,
yeah, you were with me, maybe. I thought that made total sense.
Yeah, it makes
We don't use that, but I thought that
We
made
can
so much
probably
sense.
still use that in the labels. We don't have to take it away from the
Nope.
labels.
add it to the style
don't-
guide.
No, we don't need to take it away. I think it works very well. I just
Yeah.
curious about the
Yeah, it's nice.
The origin.
Because it's
Origin.
one word for over 18 and one word for under 18.
right.
Yeah, it's great. Man, even in our code, I struggled in code I've written in the past. I've struggled with that before. I'm like, people who are not under 18. Like our
So what we could do is we
variable
could
names got
include that.
very awkward.
Those who have reached the age of majority.
Adults.
We can add it to the documentation for labeling. So say, like, maybe around birth dates or something like that, like when party is over 18 or party is under 18, you can just put the label as like plaintiff is
Is
major.
major or plaintiff is
I'll play
minor.
around with it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And my goal is that the next time I talk to a reporter to try to get them to mention a name, not just the fact that you're in South Africa.
Yeah.
Every article, it's like, and there's an attorney in South Africa. I think
All
maybe I
that
need
matters. That's all that matters. It doesn't
I
really
think maybe I
matter
need to
who
provide
you
them
are.
with a spelling of the last name.
The one, the ABA journal was so funny. They were like, it can be implemented in other places, like South Africa. I was like, okay. We're getting so many call outs. It's great though. But yeah, I think, okay, I'm pulling a mat. I'm cognizant of everyone's time. I'm gonna drop the link to the documentation. If you have an idle minute, just have a look, just make comments and see what we can change or improve on. Other than that, I think
That sounds awesome. It's nice to be on a call with y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to
And
see you.
we will see everyone not tomorrow because it's a weekend. But it's hard to believe we've only been doing this for 2 weeks.
Easter.
Weekend? Who stops for the weekend? Okay.
My son and wife have the day off because it's a holiday.
Yeah, my wife does too.
The university doesn't.
Sense.
Yeah, well, for the schools, it's Good Friday.
Oh, I had no idea.
We didn't get Passover off.
Catholicism here.
Huh.
That
Not
way.
like I went to a Catholic school.
Convent.
Yeah.
Okay, bye guys.
All right. Bye-bye. Sorry. Bye-bye.
All right.